Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And we're coming at you with a topical idea this week. Not only because we've been playing Age of Sigmar, which kind of puts it in our head, but because there has been, let's call it some light conversation in the community. Following a video that a popular YouTuber put out around Age of Sigmar in general. But one of the key issues is the double turn in Age of Sigmar. And man, it was a bit of a maelstrom, as it is every time this topic is brought up in the community for one reason or another. And I thought we would take some time to talk about it. And maybe try to break down what the hell everyone's even arguing about, and why it seems to be so damn difficult to talk about this. Because it does just keep happening. And I guess to recreate what you're used to, we can scream and stomp and shout obscenities for 15 minutes or so we could recreate the average comment section.
I bought a 12-pack of Natty Light. I plan on throwing at least 8 of them at Joseph when I'm done drinking each of them.
Well, John, that is a little wasteful, but it's Natty Light, so I guess it's really not.
No, like I'm drinking the Natty Light first, then throwing the empty can at you.
Oh, that's awfully nice of you.
Yeah.
Usually, I'm not given that courtesy. Yeah, we're going to try to break this thing down, because I can see why some people get real heated about it, but I just do not want to be one of them people. But first, we got to talk about the hobby time in the games we've been playing.
Turn around, bright eyes.
What? What are we turning around? It's not even topical.
Double turn it around.
That's for the topic transition.
All right,
John, what have you been doing for hobby?
What have I been doing for hobby?
Yes, John, what have you been doing for hobby?
I mean, I played 2 games against this asshole Beast of Chaos player.
Sounds like you had a bad time.
Go fuck yourself. And then I played a bunch of other games. Like I played 5 total games over the course of like a week. It's pretty good.
That's a lot of games.
Yeah, all of them were Slaves of Darkness. Great time. Lost 4 out of the 5 of them.
Some might say you took a bleeding.
All right, this is... No. Turns out Slaves of Darkness are really tough at low points values because you can't bring a whole lot of anything. And it's just a struggle. But painting-wise, kept painting them slowly but surely, taking my time. Gonna paint more of them when we're done recording this. It's gonna be good.
Mm-hmm. How many have you got painted?
I am at the final stages of 15 models, and I'm not going to be completed with those until I have more to just batch all of the enamel all together.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going in with like little details and trying to pick out most of everything to try to make it pop a little bit. But how about you? What you been doing?
I mean,
I know what you've been doing. Tell them.
I've been doing the same thing you've been doing. I've been playing a whole lot of games of our Escalation League. We've talked about for a little while now that we've been trying to start this league, and I painted a beautiful 750 points of Soulblight Gravelords that I spent a lot of time on, and they looked nice, and they were fully based and completed and ready to go way early and ahead of time. And then, like an absolute dipshit, I have decided to pivot, and instead, now I'm playing Beasts of Chaos. So I have spent the past 2 weeks frantically printing and frantically painting goats to try to be ready for this here weekend that we just had. And played a lot of goats. Also painted a lot. In the past 2 weeks, I painted 10 Ungor, 10 Gore, a Beast Lord, a Bray Shaman, 3 Bulgors, and then printed a Cockatrice and a stand-in for a Chaos Gargant as well. And before the weekend got around, I was able to paint everything except for the Gargant and the Cockatrice, so all but 2 models, which is not too shabby, I would say. Been
that's
off to the races.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's a significant amount of model painted. That totally isn't way more than I've done.
Yeah, don't go comparing sizes, John. Everyone be sad. It's going pretty well. I started with like a test model to figure out the scheme, and it made all of the other subsequent models much faster. And I really just sat down every time I could and hammered out step by step to try to get ready for the weekend because I knew I had an event coming. But I ended up playing... I've played 6 games of my Beasts of Chaos now, I think. Yeah, 2 against you, the Slaves to Darkness, and then I played a list against Brian, who is running all Zangor's Zinch lists. And then I played our buddy Corwin's Soulblight Gravelords, and then our friend Tanner's Stormcast Eternals. And then I got my teeth kicked in by Seraphon. So far, though, 4-2. Not bad for a new Goats player in a tricky book. I'm enjoying the Goats quite a bit. Enough to where I keep on painting. We had everybody come over on like a Friday evening, and then we were hanging out all weekend. And I gave myself the Sunday after everyone left to relax, because I had some cleaning to do to sort of tidy up after I had, a bunch of people in the house. And one day later, the following day, Monday, I was back to hobbying. I had to fix up some gaps in the cockatrice, and now it's ready for prime and painting. So yeah, having a real good go at the goats. I don't think I've posted a lot of them on Instagram though, so I got to do that. Also, the Instagram game is getting stepped up because my wife is really helpful, and I decided I was going to try to take better pictures of minis, and she decided she was going to help me to help myself to take better pictures of minis. Posted a nicer one up of the first goat, and it went pretty well. So more are coming to Instagram, because I think I was just so in the zone I didn't even think about posting them to people. Like, no, gotta paint more goat. No time to share goat. Got more goat.
Got more goat. Got a bah.
Yeah, you could say I'm down bad.
God damn it. All right.
But yeah, it's been a fun time. I'm really enjoying the goats. They're a good army. I'm probably going to do a faction review. John, I might feel spicy enough to do a damn faction review.
Ooh.
I might. Ooh, it'd be the first one in a little while. But I'm feeling the goat action. And it's been nice to just play a ton of AOS. Because as, in the community, stuff was kind of kick it up just a little bit. We were playing Age of Sigmar ourselves, and it kind of allowed us to refresh some of our opinions on the double turn after playing a lot of games back to back to back to back. And hopefully it helps this next bit to be a little more cohesive than it might otherwise be. Seth, play the music. You see, John, that's how you do a transition. You can't just sing random songs 2 sections early.
Yes, I can.
John, the double turn.
Yes.
What is
the
it?
double turn?
What are we talking about? For people who might not play Age of Sigmar or understand why there's so many people talking about this.
So, in most war games, right, whoever goes first then passes it to the second player, and then it passes back to the first player in like a predictable order. In Age of Sigmar, you don't. So whenever the round turns over, and there's like 5-6 rounds in a game, you roll off to see who gets priority. And with priority, you get to pick, do I want to go first or do I want to go second? in that round. So there are times in which the person who went second in the previous round gets priority and can go immediately again to push the advantage.
Yep.
Or do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And
it's one of those things that doesn't sound all that complicated.
Yeah, it doesn't sound all that complicated until you're staring down a all shooting list that you didn't expect that shoots you off the table in 2 turns.
Are you speaking from experience, John? I feel like there's an experience here.
Well, I mean, with a little bit of hyperbole, sure. But like it does create like a little bit of culture shock comparatively to like I'll say 40K, where you go, your opponent goes, and you can always kind of bank on them getting one shooting phase.
Mm-hmm.
But in AOS, they could get 2 on you, and there's no way to really predict it because you can't. If I'm correct, I don't think there's a single faction in the game that alters that priority roll in any way. It's entirely a 50-50 shot.
Archaon used to be able to see the rolls results before your opponent, but I think that's the only thing that touches it.
Yeah, I think they took that away.
Yeah, I don't know if that is still a thing because I don't play Archaon lists, but like that is the only mechanic I can recall in my time playing Age of Sigmar that has affected it.
Yeah, and I at first I didn't enjoy it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I've kind of come around on that, right?
Yeah. I think, like, if nothing else, like, we'll share most of our opinions for later on, but, like, the thing that is worth mentioning is, like, how it works for people who might not be familiar. So, like, you know, it literally can give someone 2 turns back to back. And also, like, just to briefly mention why that is a standout hallmark feature of the game system. Because I think, like, most games are now in one of 2 camps. Either it's something like 40K, where you have set, strict, alternating turns that you are predictable and are going to happen consistently the same way every time. Or you're a game that's like Infinity or A Song of Ice and Fire or Malifaux, where it is always back and forth, but there's no like definitive turns. It's alternating activations. So instead of me doing my whole turn, passing it to you, and you do your whole turn, it is always us back and forth every phase. We both move at the same time. We activate models back and forth, like, you know, magic back and forth. So they've just sort of gone around the normal turn idea altogether. Age of Sigmar instead is doing something that this mechanic is something that I haven't seen in another game system. So I think like when you do come across it, especially if you have experience in other games, it's one of those things that stands out immediately as something that is noteworthy, whether that's good or bad for you, depending on preferences, if that makes any amount of sense.
Yeah, and it is a staggering difference when you like start actually digging into it. Right? Like there's only so many options your opponent has with choices when you first when you know, you can predict where the turns are going, right? Like in chess, you can predict the move someone's going to make because like 3 turns ahead because you know how the turn structure works. But when it's up to chance, that kind of gets thrown out the window. You kind of have to start making stuff up as you go and kind of go with a loose plan instead of a kind of structured, I'm going to do this and then this and then this, and then my combo goes off and I win the game.
Yeah, at the least, you have to plan for a number of contingencies. Like if you're a hard planner, the amount of scenarios you have to consider just gets much wider. And it is something that like I see these conversations about it pop up and then die back down, and then pop up again and then die back down. And I'm always kind of curious what kicks them off when things kind of explode, because it happens from time to time, and I can't be everywhere on the internet. Who knew? But in this case, a YouTuber called Miniac, who is by God, he's a great content creator and a hell of a mini painter. Like you really, really should watch that channel if you're like looking to get better at painting or like what have you. And Miniac released a video that talked about a number of points in Age of Sigmar, some of which I actually agree with quite a bit. But one of the things that he talked about was the double turn, and how for him he really doesn't like it, and it feels like it outright decides who wins and loses. Oh, I might be misquoting him there, so I won't say outright that it heavily influences who wins and loses. Oh, that's a safe way. And that is went like wildfire around the community because he's quite a popular video maker, and it kind of drums some stuff up. And I have seen comments going either way, back and forth, and not all of which are very nice. But I guess now that we've kind of explained it and we know why this is running around the groups again, whether you're in Discords or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, like wherever you look at the content stuff, like if you're someone who's been in the hobby for a while, this might not be the first time you've seen this kick up. So why is it that when we do talk about this as a community, that it's always so weird? And I can't say for sure, because I'm not omnipotent and neither is John, but we have some thoughts on why that might be the case. And I think first and foremost is that it is almost an inherently divisive mechanic, because as I mentioned before, almost no other game does this, or at least none that I've seen, which means that when people come to this game and they're playing it for the first time, they aren't sort of pre-primed for this mechanic to feature as a cornerstone of the game system. And it's almost like a shock. No matter what game you played before, coming here is going to be very, very different. And in the end, you might end up really liking it. But at the least, we can acknowledge that like it is different enough that it is going to ping everyone's radar when they notice it.
Yeah, like a non-wargaming example I can give is the game Hunt Showdown, right?
Oh yeah, I love me some Hunt Showdown.
When you go to play that rootin' tootin' cowboy shooting monsters game, it seems really cool aesthetically, and you're like, oh yeah, it's like a battle royale where I gotta go fight monsters in a bayou. That's awesome. That's like our brand. And then you go in there and realize that if you die in one of the missions, you lose all your progress on that character and you gotta start all over again.
Yep,
and
they're
you
gone
hear that
permanently.
Yeah, you hear that and you're like, holy fuck, that sucks. That's terrible. Why would you do that? Like, that sounds like the worst time. And then you play it for a while and you realize, oh, you get experience pretty fast. Oh, it makes it a much more rewarding experience when you finish a character. Oh, okay. So, like, it adds to the tension and the depth of, like, the experience. Okay. Like, there's a level of break-in time that you need with the mechanic to fully grasp it that you're not going to get from one or two games. And also, similar to the double turn, if you die in the beginning of every mission in Hunt Showdown, it feels bad. And when you're playing a low point value game in Age of Sigmar, which most new people are, playing like 500, 750,000 points, the double turn feels way more strong. But it isn't that same way throughout the entirety of the experience. And it's kind of an unfair take to go, I've played 4 games with this thing. I know everything about it.
Yeah.
But all 4 of those games are at 1,000 points.
Yeah, and like I don't fault people for that because like Games Workshop's core rulebook entirely makes it seem like that's a perfectly fine level to play the game at. That like, oh, yeah, like you can play it at 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 or 2K, and it works for all of them. And they say that. And
yeah, but it's about the same way that I could play Hunt and Showdown on an HP Pavilion laptop from like 2009. Doesn't mean I should.
You're probably going to have a different experience than if you were playing on what they intended. And that's on them. I don't blame people who get that outcome, but like it does make it difficult. And maybe you play Hunt and you realize that mechanic just isn't for you, and that's fine. You walk away. But you will always remember it, and when asked about it, it's going to come up, and you might feel strongly about it depending upon your preferences. So, like, I think that is the basis upon which a lot of this spins. It's because everybody has noticed it, so everybody's going to have some type of opinion.
Yeah. it is also like this is a social game, right? Like, and it's a core rule. It's probably the most unique core rule in AOS.
Yeah, that's probably true. I was just like off
So
the top of my head trying to ponder some others, but this one really does stand out.
it's like this one and endless spells, maybe. Like those are the two things everybody's just like, oh well, that's unique and different.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone's going to talk about that when they're like talking about with other people that are new or existing players or yada yada yada. Like it's it's noteworthy. It's discussable.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think for some people, if you're playing a game and you're really, really frustrated that maybe you're not performing as well as you would like, and you're trying to ask yourself why that is, this is an easy thing for you to recognize as a factor and then attribute your loss to, whether that is entirely the case or not. Just because it stands out so much that like it's an easy thing to just foist all your frustrations onto, some of which might be fair and some of which might not be. And that is going to make some of these conversations rather emotionally charged. Someone might remember the time that they like were set up to win the game, and if they won the game, they got like $80 bajillion. And then they lost it to a double turn, and now they're old man Smithers grumbling about it underneath the bleachers every day.
There was one time this game where I was playing Skaven against Joe Skahard on Overlords. If I would have won the game, he had to buy me chicken tenders, and he double turned, shot me off the table, and I was very upset about it because I didn't get no chicken tenders. Joe made me like not eat the rest of the day. He made me starve.
That's not how that went. I mean, I did blow you off the table. That was true, but you still got tenders.
Yeah, it's true. I can't, in good consciousness, let everyone listening think that Joe doesn't feed me often.
You can't be over here telling tendy lies, John. Not
It's true.
No, not here. Not in this
The amount of-
hallowed place.
The amount of times we go get chicken tenders and Joseph just goes, "Bitch, why you taking your wallet out?" Like,
It's one of those things that I do like to do now. I'm like, I ain't got money. That is not what I asked you. I said, where do you want to eat, ho? Like, that's a different question. And like, I think that's gonna like emotionally charge stuff. And as John kind of alluded to, I think it's something that really it is going to take a lot of time for you to really see the nuance of it. And you may not like it, but like at least with experience, you could see that there is appeal in it and where that lies. But it's going to take a lot of games before you start understanding the times when the double turn plays a factor that you could strategize around. And again, that learning might be stumped if you keep playing at low points values where it doesn't necessarily work the way you want. And
or the way it was even really intended. Like,
yeah, well,
it's much easier to slap 4 units off the table than it is to slap 12.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's something we have felt recently because we're playing an escalation league. So like the point of the league is that you start at a very small point value and then you work your way up. And the whole point is that you can like paint and build an army as you go in like a consistent rate that you can anticipate and hobby around, which is really cool. But see, I have played this game at 2,000 points a lot of the time, which means that after doing that, I could feel some of the difference when we are down here playing at 750 points. And oh, buddy, does it really feel different depending on what your point value is. For example, in 2,000 points, which is like the full standard size for a game, there are things you can do to mitigate the potential damage that your opponent getting a double turn could do to you. For example, you could put little, what we usually called chaff units out front of your like really important units. Just little like nobodies that can sit out there and eat the charge and take the damage and die, allowing your big sort of strong units to stay safe in the backline. And that sounds great It works really well, and it makes it to where, like, oh, if they double me, they're just going to kill my chaff, and that's okay. I'll get a response. At 750 points, where you don't have very many points to work with, you probably don't have enough points left over to pay for multiple chaff lines. You just don't. So you're going to eat that, and it might feel rough. Or you could have a bunch of synergy heroes at 2,000 points to where you can give yourself buffs, making sure that when your opponent gets the double turn, you got a bunch of defensive buffs up. Well, at 750 points, you probably don't have the extra room in your list for said utility heroes to give you those buffs. So that's another thing that normally you would do as a response that now you simply do not have.
And sometimes you want to give up the double turn to your opponent because they might have all their buffs up and you want them to have to try to recast those and try to like outmaneuver them in like a magic phase. And that might not be an option because really no one's casting a bunch of buffs because they might have one or two wizards.
Yeah, so some of that nuance on when you want your opponent to double turn is also pulled out. So, and I'm sure there are other ways people could come up with, but, just an example that at lower points levels, you're really not seeing the full scope of some of the nuance of this rule, because there is less you can do about it, because you don't have the units to interact. And I think that can really shine a light on a bad time. If this was my first time ever playing Age of Sigmar and I didn't have the experience of playing larger points games before I came here, I can understand where you get some of those opinions. But for us, who have played, we've played a little bit of the game over the past couple of editions. So you could say safely, we've also played other war games, including 40K, A Song of Ice and Fire, Warmahordes, Malifaux. We've been around.
We've both been playing turn-based strategy games since we were 7.
That's true. But we've been around the block a bit. So for us, what is our opinion about double turns? And John, I'll let you pitch it because I think it's fairly simple.
Yeah, so I think we're in agreement here. The double turn is a unique mechanic that adds more diversity and unpredictability to a game that often can feel rote.
Yeah.
In 40K, it's pretty easy once you've played the game enough, especially if you're playing against the same faction over and over and over again, to kind of predict where it's going to go turn 3, turn 4. By the end of turn 1, you don't really have that in Age of Sigmar because it can just wildly change. I mean, even in this last weekend, there was a game I played against Tanner, who was playing Stormcast, and I was playing Slaves of Darkness, and I thought I was in a position to win the game. I was really close to be able to just 1-2 punch, bada bing, bada boom, win. And he was able to double turn me and outmaneuver me and get a comeback with points that it wouldn't have been possible if not for the double turn. And it wasn't an overwhelming outmaneuver. He just genuinely outmaneuvered me. It wasn't because of the double turn. The double turn just enabled it. He took a risk in that second phase of the turn and went, I want to try to win this game, and I have to take a risk here. And if I get the double turn, that will let me win. That doesn't happen if you don't have the double turn. So it also incentivizes not just playing it safe or playing it KG, but also playing aggressively. Or if you do want to play KG, it kind of rewards that because you never know when the tide's going to turn. And being ready for that is rewarding itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would fully agree with that. And I think the interesting thing to note there is that when you've played for a while, you could see how it helped him, but it didn't win it for him, which I think is the opinion that is sometimes thrown around a lot that I don't think is entirely fair. It's a tool in an opponent's toolbox that sometimes you really do have to put it all on the line and just risk it for the biscuit and hope for the double turn. But normally that's not the case. And I think that makes it better. However, I didn't always feel that way. When I started Age of Sigmar, the double turn felt a little strong, but it's because I didn't see the other layers. I did, I was playing at a low point value where you were never going to see the yellow layers because those layers didn't exist. Like you can't spot what isn't there. But once I got to bigger point value games, I started to realize, like, okay, this Iron Jaws player keeps just smacking the crap out of my good units every single time they get their turn. And, like, if they double turn me, I'm doomed. What do I do? Oh, well, I got this little, like, filler points of nobodies. Oh, well, shit. If I could just, like, put them in front of my guys, now they're going to have to kill them first.
Yeah.
Oh. Like,
And then
light bulbs
maybe
start turning on.
Yeah, and then maybe you add a couple of chaff units, and they know that they're going to have to chew through those units, maybe play a little risky to get to the meat. And then, oh no, they didn't get the double turn, and now you get to counterpunch.
Yeah, you've put
Like,
your mega boss into my army hoping to get the double turn, and you didn't get it. And now my whole army gets to kill your big stompy mega boss. Because you risked it for the biscuit, and now I win. There's nuance there that, like, I just could not see at first. But over time, I've really come around on the double turn. However, I can get why it's a mechanic that isn't for everyone, because I am the type of player that does not mind randomness in my games. It does not bother me to have like dice rolls or, randomized mechanics like this to help make the game more interesting. That's not something I dislike. I'm fine with it. But there are certain types of players for whom that is anathema. They want to do, like, probable odds, know the math, play the math, win. They want, like, chess rather than more chance. And I
yeah,
get
and
it.
like, and it's always been a concept in game theory, right? Like, there's always randomness, there's always chance, but what is the difference between controllable chance and uncontrollable chance? Which is the kind of the core crux here is like you have a roll, the 50-50 roll that you cannot influence in the game whatsoever that can dictate whether the choices you made are good or bad. It's a tough pill to swallow if you're somebody who likes to be able to go, okay, I can make these 6 decisions and it'll put me within this parameter of like possibility. Well, as opposed to the other people who are like, I think I made good decisions. Let's roll the dice and see how it goes. Like, those are like two wolves of inside of game design, if it were, that are always at war with each other. But you kind of need both in a game for it to be appealing to a mass amount of people. You can't have complete and total randomness because then the spiky people won't have a good time. You can't have complete and total lack of randomness because then the Timmy guys won't have fun, or the Johnnies who want a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's something that, like, you want to do in moderation, and I think for the most part, Age of Sigmar does it fairly well. I don't think that is always the case, or at least was always the case, but I think now they've arrived at a fairly good place with it. But to that end, like, it is something that I wouldn't want to see in all game systems.
No.
Because I think, like, what makes the double turn work here is that they added it in when they were writing the foundational rules. And it is a cornerstone that they built this house upon. And that meant that everything they designed was made with this in mind. Knowing that it's possible for it to get 2 turns of activation every game. And I think that mitigates some of the issues that would be here otherwise. And if you just took this mechanic and put it into another game that wasn't designed for it from the ground up, you would see a lot of problems. 40k in particular, if you threw this into 40k, I think it would go badly instantaneously.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point. Like, the 40k is just structured differently, right? And what makes the structure of AOS work with the double turn is that you're kind of building battle lines and then having pinch points within those battle lines to push through, to hold objectives. Most of the missions are based around like very standard points of control with objectives that are not very difficult to get. Even like the battle tactics and grand strategies are generally around those objectives and not like spread out. It is two sides of a massive army clashing against one another in this little window of a battlefield. In games like 40K or something like a skirmish game like Infinity or Kill Team, like they don't do that. They're like little small skirmishes or little zones of control against each other that aren't more regimented. They are much more like nebulous and moving around. And the objectives are just different. Sometimes it's not about holding objectives. Sometimes it's about board control in a way that is different than a kind of rank and flank fantasy game. A game I think it might do well in is something like A Song of Ice and Fire, right? Like maybe like a priority roll each time someone's activating a unit. Though that would be cumbersome, like could be neat.
Yeah, well, and I think also the thing that makes it work for Age of Sigmar is that the average damage is just much lower than games like 40K, for example, especially
Yes.
at range. There is just so much less range damage to make that double turn feel oppressive. It's
Imagine
still,
getting double turned by Imperial Knights.
that'd be bad.
It'd be so
That'd be bad.
bad.
Or like big killy Tyranids. That'd be awful. Age of Sigmar was made and still has quite a fair amount of damage, but less of it at range, which is really where double turns would suffer sometimes. Because they could shoot over your chaff walls and such, and just to like get all of your good stuff. That's why there's not a ton of shooting in Age of Sigmar.
And generally, they try to like stamp it down when it gets too oppressive. Yeah,
They really do. But if you are playing a game of 40K, there are a number of shooting armies that are all deadly.
it's also just like a galaxy brain game compared to AOS. I'm not saying AOS is easy or less like requires less skill, but in 40K, there's just like stratagems and sub factions and all these like a billion things. Some of them also exist in AOS, but there's a lot more to know about what your opponent is doing and what they can do and the combos and yada yada yada. And if you had to worry about that in the context of getting double turned, well, like imagine playing against a Gene Stealer cult player and you get double turned by them and having to prepare for that possibility.
That would be just downright painful. And I don't know what you do against it.
Like against Guard, it would make sense. Against Tyranids, it makes sense. Even Space Marines, but some of these factions are just like crazy. And trying to outplan them would be nigh impossible.
Yeah, it's just the game isn't built for that much potential damage and complexity all at once coming like back to back. To like you need a chance to try to stabilize and respond, otherwise you just crumble. So like this is not something that I like so much that I would be like, yeah, pull it into every game. But it is something I like enough that I certainly think it should stay in this game. And that I get some enjoyment out of from its complexity and depth that it brings to the games I play with it. But so really, like, we wanted to make this, though, to break it down and to try to help people understand what's going on and to maybe arm you with a little bit of information so that if you do have someone who wants to have a reasonable conversation around it, that you know sort of like the pain points to avoid and to maybe arm you with a little bit of empathy for what they might be feeling and where it might be coming from. I know for me, it's always helpful when I'm into these topics that can get a little internet spicy over like inane stuff to understand why people are so heated about it. It just helps me to come at it a little more prepared. Guess that's the word I would use. Because some of the, like, as we've had an episode about recently, like some of these hot button topics in the community can be rough, but I don't think they have to be. And if we can help y'all to maybe like approach it a little more calmly, kindly, I'd really like that. Just some general podcast notes though. John and I are over here talking about this here 10th edition that has been leaked to high heaven.
Yeehaw.
Yeah. We know that like 40K 10th edition is coming in the summer, and we are planning some content around it. Maybe a full breakdown of every army that's coming out. and how they play as a sort of like primer to 10th to help people get into it, and maybe some faction focuses to really like get into the nitty gritty on some of the factions we really like, depending on how that launch goes. So there is stuff happening around here, and we've also got some topics coming based off of our Age of Sigmar League, because we've got big thoughts about some stuff we've had experienced.
Yeah. And if you want to influence those big thoughts, or if you want to have us give us a couple suggestions of stuff you'd like to see before 10th edition drops, or if you just really want us to cover your army or anything like that, drop it to us on social media, leave a comment, like, subscribe, whole 9 yards. We are open to doing unique stuff for our listeners. There's not a whole lot of you out there, but we're glad you're here, and we'd love to give you stuff that you want to listen to.
Yeah, especially around the like a new edition where stuff is going to get real weird, you know. It is a time where we might be able to really help you if you're like struggling on a certain thing. So please, like we always say to reach out, but in this time of change, like consider it a little more. And in the meantime, we'll be cooking up new hobby ideas and arguing about the double turn. And that's been all of our thoughts. Bona fide Kentucky Fried. We'll see you on the next one. And I remembered the outro about a second and a half too late. God's rubbing off on